this symbol representing the Blessed One who rediscovered these truths and was able to teach them to us. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. So tonight we're going to talk about the first path factor in the Noble Eightfold Path. But before we do that, I thought I'd give a quick summary of where we've been to get to here. And so the Noble Eightfold Path is the fourth of the Four Noble Truths. And so we'll just quickly go over the Four Noble Truths again. And furthermore, in this particular grouping, I just want to run through the 12 aspects, 3 perspectives and 12 aspects. This is taken from the Setting in Motion, the Wheel of Dhamma, Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. In this very first sermon, that very first talk he gave to the group of 5 bhikkhus, he summarized it at the end, saying, when my penetration and insight into these 4 noble truths as they really are was thoroughly complete in their 3 phases and 12 aspects, then did I claim to have awakened to the unsurpassed perfect enlightenment in this world, or perfect awakening. So this 12 respects goes through, you can see the numbering 1, 2, 3, 4, and then each of the Noble Truths has 3 perspectives. And the first perspective, or perspective A, is the statement of the truth. This is the Noble Truth of suffering. Perspective B is, what should we do with this truth? Well, for the first Noble Truth, suffering is to be understood. Then, when we've completed the practice and become Arahantas, and of course the first person to have done this was the Buddha himself, the perspective 3 is suffering has been fully understood. The second Noble Truth, this is the Noble Truth of the origin or cause of suffering, that is wanting, which causes rebirth. And this wanting, which is the origin of suffering, what are we supposed to do with it? We're supposed to abandon it. And the statement of the Arahants is, this wanting has been abandoned. The Noble Truth of the cessation of suffering, so that's the statement of the Noble Truth. This is the Noble Truth of the cessation of suffering. Or you could say, this Noble Truth is that the cessation of suffering is possible. This is a thing that can happen. It's true that suffering can end. And that's what cessation means, by the way, end. So you could say this is the Noble Truth of the ending of suffering. And this Noble Truth of the ending of suffering, it should be realized. It should be realized for oneself. Perhaps actualized, manifested, brought into existence. this ending of suffering. Or should we say, suffering should be taken out of existence. And this noble truth of the cessation of suffering has been realised, because what is realised, and why it's realised, is because the suffering's all in our heart mind, and if we can realise and let go of that wanting, then that suffering ends, and we realise that. And when it does end, we know. And the statement of the Arahants is the third perspective. This noble truth of the cessation of suffering has been realised. And this is an enormous statement of hope. It has been realised. This has been done. And this achievement has been done first by the Buddha, but then subsequently by many, many men and women and children. And there were children at the time of the Buddha who realised these noble truths and became Arahants and Arahantas. This is the noble truth, number 4, of the practice that leads to the cessation of suffering. The treatment plan, if you like, the lifestyle that we have to live. For this practice, all of the things that we need to practice in order to have suffering end, this becomes our lifestyle, viharati, it's the way we live. And so it's a completely integrated treatment plan to treat suffering and to treat the cause of suffering, which is wanting. And so, what do we supposed to do with this treatment plan? Well, we're supposed to develop it and practice it and actually live our life according to this treatment plan. And all of the qualities need to be developed and cultivated. So the practice of the Noble Eightfold Path needs to be developed, cultivated, lived. It's a multi-lifetime project. This noble truth of the practice that leads to the cessation of suffering has been developed by the Buddha. It has been developed by the Arahants and Arahantas. It can be developed by us. It's possible, not impossible. This is something that we can do moment to moment. So, now we've gone over those 4 noble truths. Today we're going to look at this practice, this lifestyle. And we're going to begin with the first noble truth, which is right view, Samma Ditthi. Now, I wanted to show you another page on Samma Ditthi, which is in this one. There. And, I should make that a bit bigger, shouldn't I? But the reason it's so small, crikey, is you can see that actually right understanding is most of that page. You can see here, if I don't know if you can, there we go, there's the plus button. There we go. Right understanding here is pages 30 down through to page 44, well, 46 really. So there's a lot to it, because right view, it's one of the ones that actually is a really easy word to word. Exactly, it does mean that. View and ditthi really means all the things that view means in English, you know, your world view, your perspective, your way of seeing things, how you view yourself, how you view the world, what ideas and concepts you have in terms which colour your world view. And so this is why there's such a lot to go through in terms of working with right view, because each of us perhaps or in each of these situations, the people had a slightly different take on wrong view, and so the Buddha had to give them a slightly different take on how to get to right view. The one we looked at last week, we had a quick look at right view as the fourth noble path factor, first part of the Noble Eightfold Path, which is the fourth noble truth. And in that, the Buddha went through the wrong view that and debunked the wrong view that there is a creator God that created the world. And in it he suggests that right view is that the gods, that there are gods, but they were the first beings reborn into the newly born universe. So that was last week's right view and wrong view. Today we had a quick, the first version of right view is understanding the Four Noble Truths, which we went through, and now we'll have a look at a few of these. We won't have perhaps time to look at everything, but we'll begin on some of them and we'll get as far as we can, and perhaps we'll do some more next week. Let's see how far we get. So I'm back over on this one. So what now is right understanding? So clearly understanding the Four Noble Truths is one path to right view. If you understand the Four Noble Truths, you definitely have right view. The understanding of merit and demerit is also right view. So merit, things that are of benefit to the world; demerit, things that are harmful to the world. Yeah? So understanding benefit and harm in terms of karmic karma. So here the noble disciple understands what is karmically wholesome, the root of wholesome karma, what is karmically unwholesome, and the root of unwholesome karma. And I very much like the way Venerable Jnanatiloka has structured this as sort of like in brackets here. So, oops, I wish I had a bit more. There we go. So here he groups, we have, I think it's 10, the 10 unwholesome deeds, and they are grouped as 3 unwholesome bodily actions, 4 unwholesome verbal actions, and on the next page 3 unwholesome mental actions. And if you want a copy of this book that I'm using as the source material, there's a link to it in the previous on the Buddhist Society of South Australia website. There's a link to this in the article about these talks. So these are the 10 or dasa evil, harmful things, that harm you and harm your life. The akusala karmapata. Dasa akusala karmapata, if you want the Pali there. But basically, 10 things that harm yourself and harm other beings. So the bodily action, the 10 unwholesome bodily actions which cause harm to you now and harm to you in the future, harm to others now and possibly harm to others in the future too. And number 1, top of the list, is destruction or harming of living beings. And notice it says beings, it doesn't say just humans. And so one of the things about destroying living beings is that much of our modern lifestyle destroys living beings. The forests that get chopped down and all the animals that used to live in those forests. We really need to protect these living beings and not have them harmed because of our greed. Okay, so that is a really karmically unwholesome action, and even though it's done through so many intermediaries, it's still going to cause effects for us later. But naturally, the direct, intentional destroying of living beings is the main karmically unwholesome action, where you harm people just with your words and actions, or where you harm animals, or harm birds, or harm insects, or harm spiders. So all harming, I think here he says destruction, but destruction is not the only aspect of harming. So the karmically unwholesome action, of course, starts with killing, but it's also lesser types of harm are also karmically unwholesome. Naturally, stealing, unwholesome sexual intercourse, and I'm going to say harmful sexual intercourse, because there have been societies where their law system allows some really harmful sexual practices, but just because it is the law doesn't necessarily make it okay. So the Vinaya goes into great detail about what is a harmful sexual practice, and basically it boils down to, I suppose if you pull apart Karmesu Michachara, so Karmesu, through, by, or with our sensual desires, Micha, unwholesome, harmful, Achara, behavior. So basically when we are putting our desires onto somebody else who doesn't have the power to say, no, stop doing that, this is the very fundamentals of the very fundamental meaning of sexual misconduct in Buddhism. To be putting your sexual desires onto somebody else who's in a position of perhaps not being able to say no. For example, children, the disabled, the elders, servants, slaves, employees, beings such as that. All of those people don't necessarily have the power to make no stick, or maybe too afraid to say no, and so to push one's sexual desires onto a person who doesn't have the power to say no is unwholesome sexual misconduct. And then we come into, and so that's quite clearly the three bases for physical harmful action. Just killing or harming, stealing, and putting one's sexual, like, basically sexual harassment. And by the way, between two people of equal power, it's not sexual harassment. It's only harassment when one person has more power than the other person. When it's two people of equal power, well, it's like, well, I don't like that and that's really annoying, stop it. And I have the power to make you stop it. So the verbal actions, I think it's quite obvious to everyone that lying is karmically unwholesome. And I mean, that's at the gross end. Tale bearing, harsh language. But I think we often forget how unbeneficial frivolous talk is. But where's the right view here? I'll just finish off with the mental actions, which is covetousness, which is the opposite to mudita. So mudita is feeling glad that somebody else has something that's wonderful. Covetousness is feeling really bad about the fact that they've got something that you want. It's a pretty negative sort of space. Ill will and wrong views are karmically unwholesome. So here we come to wrong view. It's almost like a circular argument. What's wrong view? Wrong view is wrong view. And what's right view? Well, knowing what's wholesome and unwholesome. And what's unwholesome? Wrong view's unwholesome. Because it harms us and we don't even know. When we have wrong view, so wrong view is that these things are okay. That killing beings is just fine. I'll go and work in an abattoir and kill, or a slaughterhouse and kill animals all day, and that is just fine, and there's not going to be any karmic repercussions. That's wrong view. It's not just fine. I know somebody's got to do it, okay, but the person, whoever those people are that slaughter those animals that end up in the packet that's in our supermarket, they cop the karmic load of that. And it's wrong view to think that they don't. It's wrong view to think that stealing's is okay. It's wrong view to think that putting your sexual desires on someone is okay. It's wrong view to think that it's okay to tell untruths. It's wrong view to think it's okay to tell white lies. It's untrue to think that it's okay to use harsh and cruel language. It's not okay. Even if it's true, it's still not okay to speak it harshly and unkindly. And it's wrong view to think that frivolous talk's okay. It's not a waste of time, karmically speaking, because it is a waste of time. It's a wrong view to think it's all right to be jealous and to covet and to want what other people have got and to have a negative mind space about it. It's not okay. It harms you and it harms other people. It's not okay to have ill will. Wrong view is thinking ill will's okay. So he says that the roots of these unwholesome karmas are greed, hatred, and delusion. And therefore, basically, all of those 10 harmful actions are based in either greed, hatred, or delusion. And so, of course, then right view is understanding that the opposite is beneficial. But I won't go through that now. So, what was that? What else was I going to look at first? Yeah, okay. Now, the next kind of right view is understanding the 3 characteristics, the Tilakkhana of anicca, anatta and dukkha, but I feel that's a whole talk to itself. So we'll look at the Anatta Lakkhana Sutta another time. Next, the Buddha talks about right view in terms of wrong view is asking irrelevant questions, and people will always ask irrelevant questions, and the wrong view here is that they feel that knowing the answer to that question will make them happy, but it won't. Knowing the answer to that question might give them some temporary pleasure, but in terms of the path to the ending of suffering, it's completely irrelevant. And the Buddha always refused to answer irrelevant questions, such as whether the world's eternal or temporal, finite or infinite, whether the life principle is identical to the body or something different. The Buddha just does not answer those questions. And so it goes on for a whole bunch of different things. And, you know, we all ask questions like that. And some of the questions, like how many stars are in the sky is a question he's asked somewhere else, which he says is not a relevant question. And, you know, there's a whole bunch of questions that people will ask us that in terms of understanding the path is not particularly useful or relevant. For example, what does my mum think about my ordination doesn't help you with your practice. It's not a particularly useful question in terms of you letting go of suffering, what my mum's response was. As it happened, she was really thrilled. So in terms of these irrelevant questions, I really quite like the poison arrow simile. And I think this poison arrow simile also works for frivolous talk. You know, like, why would you bother doing that when you've got this poison arrow stuck in you? So it's as if a man were pierced by a poisoned arrow, and his friends and companions or near relations should send for a surgeon, but that man should say, I won't have this arrow pulled out until I know who the man is that has wounded me, and whether he's black or white or orange or green, and what his name is, and what family he belongs to, and what race he is, and what he's tall and short and medium. And truly, such a person would die of the poison in the arrow before they could find out all those details. And similarly, I feel that we could apply the same simile to frivolous talk. It'd be like you're struck with a poison arrow, and instead of letting the surgeon remove the arrow and treat the poison, you want to have a chat about his wife and his children, and how are they doing at school, and whose girlfriend is breaking up with who, and well, really you should get on with the operation, yeah? And this is why the frivolous talk is seen to be unwholesome. Sometimes it's really not obvious why just having a nice little chat is not wholesome, but if you view it in light of getting on with the practice, why would you be wasting your time with that? And because the Buddha has such urgency trying to get as many of us to Nibbana as possible. So he says, if you should seek your own welfare, you should pull out this arrow, the arrow of lamentation, pain and sorrow. For whether this theory or that belief exists, or whether it doesn't exist, or whether a God exists or does not exist, whether the world's eternal or temporal, or finite or infinite, well, any of that, whether it's true or false, it doesn't really matter, because we absolutely certainly know for sure that there's birth, and there's disease, and there's death, and there's crying, and there's being upset, and there's pain and grief and despair, and it's the ending of that which is attainable. You can end all that suffering right now in this life, and the Buddha makes this known to us. So should we go off chasing theories or this and that, or should we get on with the job of ending this suffering? So The next way the Buddha talks about right view is in terms of the five fetters, and I'm not that thrilled with this particular translation, so I'm going to pop over to Bhante Sujato's translation, and this is the longer discourse with Malunkhya, and he is giving the monks a teaching, and he says, do you remember when I taught you this before? Do you remember when I taught you the five lower fetters? And they say, and Venerable Malunkhya Putta, so this is a teaching to Venerable Malunkhya Putta. It's possible that there's other monks and even nuns or even lay people present at this time, but whoever is the most senior person in the room, the Buddha directs the talk at that person. So it might be that there's only the Buddha and Malunkhya Putta present, or there could be a large group and Venerable Malunkhya Putta being the most senior person. So the Buddha says, do you remember the five lower fetters that I taught? And when he said this, Venerable said, sir, I remember them. How do you remember them? Well, says Venerable Malunkhya Putta, I remember the lower fetters taught by the Buddha as follows: identity view, doubt, misunderstanding of precepts and observances, sensual desire, and ill will. That's how I remember the five lower fetters taught by the Buddha. And you know, I could have very much easily given that answer too, just rattled off the list. But the Buddha feels that perhaps that's a bit shallow. Maybe his understanding is a bit shallow. So he probes a bit further. Is your understanding here shallow, or what more do we understand? You know, the Buddha then discusses it in more detail. How on earth do you remember being taught the five lower fetters in that way? I'm pretty sure it must be how at the beginning of that sentence, not who. How on earth do you remember being taught the five lower fetters in that way? Wouldn't the wanderers who follow other paths fault you using the simile of the infant? For a little baby doesn't even have a concept of identity, so how could identity view possibly arise in them? And yet, the underlying tendency to identity view still lies within them. A baby doesn't even have the concepts of teachings, so how could the doubt about the teachings possibly arise in them? Yet, the underlying tendency to doubt still lies within them. A little baby doesn't even have a concept of precepts or training rules. So how could misapprehension of the precepts or training rules and observances possibly arise in them? Yet the underlying tendency to misunderstand precepts and observances still lies within them. I say misunderstand because many of you won't know what the word misapprehension means, but misapprehension means to grab it wrongly. So, for example, they will say that a police officer apprehends a criminal, and that is to catch the criminal. You can't just catch a criminal, you have to apprehend it. And so here, you didn't catch it correctly. You caught the meaning incorrectly. That's misapprehends. So I usually say misunderstood, but misapprehends actually more accurate. Okay, so here the Buddha is saying just that list isn't enough, because how can that be correct if a little baby doesn't manifest those things? Yet that baby has those underlying tendencies. So when the Buddha questioned Malunkhya Putta like this, clearly at least Ananda's present, and I suspect from the fact that he says mendicants plural, bhikkhus, that there's more bhikkhus present than just Malunkhya Putta. There may even be some bhikkhunis present. When he said this, Venerable Ananda said to the Buddha, "Now is the time, Blessed One. Now is the time, Holy One. May the Buddha teach the 5 lower fetters. The mendicants will listen and remember it." "Well then, Ananda, listen and pay close attention. I will speak." "Yes, sir." And the Buddha said this. So, take an uneducated ordinary person who has not seen the noble ones and is neither skilled nor trained in the teaching of the noble ones. They've not seen good persons and are neither skilled nor trained in the teaching of the good persons. Their heart is overcome and mired in identity view. And they don't truly understand the escape from identity of view that has arisen through the Buddha. His teachings are the escape. And because they don't understand the escape, their identity view is reinforced in them, not eliminated, and thus it becomes a lower fetter. Their heart is overcome and mired in doubt. You know, you meet people and they doubt the government, they doubt themselves, they doubt their bosses, they doubt everything. And their hearts are overcome with doubt. Mired is an interesting word. It's what happens if you were to walk into a really muddy swamp. So if you were to walk into a big hole with mud that came up to your waist and then tried to walk through that mud, you would probably get stuck in there and would be very difficult to get out again. And that's the meaning of the word mired. It means stuck in the mud. Stuck in the mud. So they're stuck in that doubt and they don't understand the escape from doubt that has arisen. That doubt is reinforced in them, not eliminated. It is a lower fetter. Their heart is overcome and mired in misunderstanding, catching wrongly precepts or training rules and observances. You know, the rituals that we do. You know, like puja and dana and pirikara and pirit and all of those things. Observances. Poya days, Uposatha days, full moon days, Katina, Vesak. It's not that those things are wrong, it's having a wrong view of them, understanding them incorrectly, grabbing onto them in the wrong way, or rejecting them in the wrong way. That's the problem. It's the misapprehension or the not catching it correctly, not understanding it, not seeing it correctly. And so they don't understand the escape that has arisen. Similarly with desire, ill will. And so for the noble ones, they do truly understand the escape from ill will that has arisen. That ill will, or all the other things that we went through, along with any underlying tendency, is given up. And then how do we do that? Well, there's a path and a practice for giving up the 5 lower fetters. It's not possible to know or see or give up these fetters without relying on that path and that practice. And that path and that practice is, of course, the Noble Eightfold Path. And so, what is the practice for giving up the 5 lower fetters? Oh, well, now we're going to go into the 4 jhanas, the 4 jhanas formula. And 8th jhanas. So stop here and we can talk about jhanas another day, and let's go back to the word of the Buddha. And so that was the working with the cessation of identity view. This one here, called Unwise Considerations, which is a nice way of it, or Unwise Reflection, is probably one of the very first suttas I ever learned or started reading. And basically one of the greatest causes of internal mental and emotional suffering is not knowing what one should be thinking about and what was worthy of thinking about and worthy of consideration, and what is unworthy and not worthy. Now I'm going to go into that one over here. So here, suffering is caused by, and if you they don't understand, so in the middle of that first paragraph, what are the defilements that take an uneducated, ordinary person, etc. They don't understand which things they should pay attention and which things they should not pay attention to. And because most people, and even a lot of the time that includes a lot of ordinary Buddhists, where we don't really understand in moment to moment in terms of what's going on in here, what is something that we should pay attention to and what is something that we should not pay attention to. I mean, I think we probably do know that we should pay attention to wholesome, uplifting topics, but sometimes we don't notice when we habitually pay attention in a wrong view kind of way to a particular topic. And how can we tell what things we should pay attention to and what things we should not pay attention to? Well, here in the second paragraph here, the Buddha says, what are the things that they pay attention to but they should not? These are the things that, when attention is paid to them, they give rise to unarisen defilements and make arisen defilements grow. That is, the defilements of sense desire, desire to be reborn, and ignorance. These are the things to which they pay attention, but should not. So, notice here he doesn't list topics that we shouldn't pay attention to. He's saying if we pay attention to something and paying attention to it causes defilements that weren't there before to come up, to arise, to come into our heart and mind. What sort of defilements? Anger, fear, doubt, greed. If they weren't there before, and then we pay attention to some particular train of thought, and then after a while of thinking that, this unwholesome state of mind comes up, then that's something that we shouldn't think about. At least we shouldn't think about it in that way. So a classic example here is anger. When anger comes up in the mind, it's harmful, but sometimes we still pay attention to something that causes anger that wasn't there before to come up. And what sorts of things do we pay attention to that causes anger to come up? Well, usually it's got to do with discontent. They out there, you're behaving in a way that I don't agree with. And because I'm thinking about you shouldn't do that and you shouldn't do that and you shouldn't do that, just thinking about that, then anger came up. So you shouldn't think about that either at all, or if you have to think about what they're doing, then you shouldn't think about it from that point of view. You need to think about it in a different way so that anger doesn't arise. Now, it's probably easiest to just not think about it, think about something else altogether rather than changing your attitude. But changing your attitude is going to have the longest effect. So, one way of changing your attitude, for example, this person's doing something that you don't like in your house, and they're your relative, and they're doing it again and again and again, and you really don't like it. Instead of thinking about that in that way and getting angry, you could think, well, they're doing that again, and that's according to their nature. It's their nature to act like that. And perhaps one day the Dhamma will touch them and they'll understand that that's not beneficial. But nothing I say is making any difference, so why get upset about it? My mind will remain unshaken. I will not get upset. I will not blurt out any bad words, even in here. I will not think bad words about them. I will not think bad words about this situation. I will not think angry words. I will not think worry words. My mind will remain unshaken. I will not get upset. I will fill my heart with kindness and compassion. So that's right reflection, okay? So if I'm thinking I'm not going to get upset, this is going to cause peacefulness and calm that wasn't there to arise. And so that's a wise reflection. If I think they shouldn't be doing that, oh, they're really naughty, they shouldn't be doing that, oh, bad, then frustration, anger and worry that wasn't there before is going to come up. And so I really shouldn't think about it in that way, because if I think about it in that way, then these unwholesome, evil mind states come up. And I don't want them in my head. I don't want anger in my head and my heart. I don't want frustration in my heart. I don't want discontent. I want to have beautiful states. So if I think, oh, they shouldn't, then I got an ugly state. But if I think, oh, well, that's just the way it is, then I can have some contentment, some equanimity. If I think, well, I love them anyway, crikey, guess then nobody's perfect, then I can be happy anyway. So their behaviour cannot force and control my mind if I don't let it. So what are the things to which they do not pay attention but should? These are the things that when attention is paid to them do not give rise to unarisen defilements and give up or end arisen defilements. So if I was thinking, oh, I love you and you're just so cute, then maybe what's going to go away is you shouldn't be doing that. I'm going to find something else to think, right? But one thing we just give up again and again and again. So then we give up the arisen defilements of desire to be reborn, and we give up ignorance. And these are the things to which they don't pay attention, but to which they should. And because of paying attention to what they should not, and not paying attention to what they should, unarisen defilements arise and arisen defilements grow. And this next paragraph is one of our favourite expressions of the ultimate wrong view. And it's a really interesting formulation of the whole me, my. I am the star of my own internal television show in here, right? We all are like the star of our own movie, yeah? Me, my. And that's all wrong view, because there's just like, it's not all about me, is it? And so here's a really good example of wrong view as expressed in the kinds of things that we think. Did I exist in the past? Did I not exist in the past? What was I in the past? How was I in the past? After being what? What did I become in the past? Will I exist in the future? Will I not exist in the future? What will I be in the future? How will I be in the future? After being what will I become in the future? Or they're undecided about the present thus. Am I? Am I not? What am I? How am I? This sentient being, where did it come from and where did it go? And when they attend improperly in this way, with wrong attention, Ayoniso Manasikara, when they attend improperly in this way, one of the following 6 views arises in them and is taken as a true and genuine fact. The view, myself exists in an absolute self. The view, myself does not exist in an absolute sense. The view, I perceive the self with the self. The view, I perceive what is not the self with the self. The view, I perceive the self with what is not the self. Or they have such a view, this self of mine is he who speaks and feels and experiences the results and good and bad deeds in all the different realms. Yeah, I think I've probably got that wrong view. I've still got this wrong view of a person, of a self. This self is permanent, everlasting, eternal and imperishable, and will last forever and ever. No, I don't think I have that one. This is misconception, the thicket of views, the desert of views, the tricks of views, the evasiveness of views, the fetter of views. An uneducated ordinary person is not free from rebirth, old age, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, sadness and distress. They're not free from suffering. So that's all the attendity views, and obviously they the opposite is there, given where we pay attention correctly and we have the right view, and naturally right view here is once again formulated as the Four Noble Truths. So that is the one on the defilements. Now it's coming up to 25 past 7. Oh yes, there we go, there's that. So I think I might wrap up on this 6 views about the self. Oh yes. And let's have a look. Noble ones, super mundane understanding, conjoined with other steps. Yeah, well, I think we'll take up the 3 characteristics, the Anatta Lakkhana, next time. Oh, on another series actually, because next week we're going to go to the second of the path factors in the Noble Eightfold Path. Next week, or maybe next fortnight actually. I like to have 2 weeks to prepare these talks. So we will look at right understanding in 2 weeks' time. I might do something else next week. Let's see how we go. Perhaps go through something other. Well, thank you very much, and perhaps I'll just finish off saying sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, and good night. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi. Svakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami. Supatipanno Bhagavato Sāvaka Saṅgho Sangham Namami.